Are you ready to get your health back but feel overwhelmed by the endless healthcare options? We believe God has called each of us to a specific assignment, and we want to make sure your body, mind, and heart are up for the task. It's time to simplify the process of healing. At Cornerstone Integrative Healing, we offer simple, effective, easy ways to prioritize your health and gain understanding. No prescription pad needed. I'm Kari, a pharmacist turned integrative health practitioner. I'm so excited to have these conversations around topics with my friend, Jenn.
Hi there, I'm Jenn, and together with our team at Cornerstone Integrative Healing, we offer an alternative to traditional healthcare, combining our expertise and experience in the medical field with our knowledge and faith to break the cycles of guessing what's wrong. We know the road to healing, feeling good again, can be overwhelming. You can expect honest conversations around the ups and downs of healing. The truth is, there are so many layers to healing. Because we've taken the time to learn where true healing comes from, we've learned how to help other women discover a different way of caring for themselves. Join us every week for new episodes as we discuss topics that are personal and pertinent to your healing journey. Hey, everybody. Jenn here with my co-host, Kari. We are so excited to come to the last two episodes of our From Hindrances to Healing series. I really feel like these are probably the most important episodes because they have to do with our spiritual identity. And I think more than we realize, a lot of our spiritual healing needs show up in physical form. And so we just want to talk a little bit about what we've learned about spiritual identity, what we've lived, in walking in our true identity, and kind of why it matters, because it's super important. It's super important for healing. It's super important for our walk with God. And we just want to talk about it.
Yeah. So let's do that. And if you're thinking, how does this go with health? And maybe you're joining us for the first episode. Hello, right. If you are, we do talk a lot in the episodes, even though it might not seem overtly that they are about spiritual things. We do talk about, and we have talked about, just how much our spiritual health and walk with the Lord matter in our physical health, because He's shown us that. But in these two episodes, we really felt called to maybe go a little bit deeper in that, because again, I'm just often reminded how God doesn't work in formulas. And so sometimes it's like whenever we come to this realization that our spiritual health does play into our physical and emotional health, then we want a checklist, or we want a formula, like, do A, B, and C, and everything's, going to be, and I'm the first one, right? Guilty as charged. However, it's just not like that. And so it was funny. I was on a call with someone just the other day, and she was asking me to explain kind of more about how spiritual things play into the health, our health. And so I kind of talked a little bit about that. And she was like, well, what if, you realize that there's a spiritual issue that's impacting your health? And I'm like, listen, I'll be the first to say, I don't have all the answers. I can't tell you, we would do A, B, and C. And, but all I could tell her, and all I can tell you, is that we have a God that knows exactly what we need. And so I have to trust, as somebody that, is trying to help people sort of realize these connections, that He's going to give you what you need. And He's also going to help me help you, if that makes sense, right? He's got it all. He's got it all covered, right? He's the one that is in control. So all that being said, I do want to just mention that we learned about this kind of concept of our spiritual identity, obviously through the Word, but also I was led to a certain book. So I definitely want to reference this book as like an excellent book that I would recommend to pretty much anybody. It's called Living Fearless, and it's by Jamie Winship. And I will make sure that link is in the show notes for you guys. It's I think it's under $10 on Amazon. Best $10 I've ever spent for sure on a book. I mean, really, I've read this book 2 or 3 times and it's just been really transformational for me. So I wanted to mention that's where a lot of these things that we are learning and we're going to talk about came from. So I definitely want to point you to that. But, in thinking about this concept of what does spiritual identity have to do with our walk with the Lord, with even our physical and emotional health, I think that when I think about the spiritual identity piece, it's the fact of what story are we believing and how is that showing up in how is that impacting us? How are we, showing up in our daily lives? How is that impacting our physical health? And Jesus talked a lot in parables, or you could also think about that as a story in the Gospels. And it would only make sense that the story that we are believing impacts our actions. Just like, he talked in parables to the disciples and really wanted them to really take on the story that he was telling them and to go out and live that in their daily lives. And kind of the same can be said in what he's asking us to do. And we really have to take a step back. And this is what this book encouraged me to do, is to take a step back and say, like, what am I believing and why am I believing it? And a lot of the times what we're believing is based on lies that the enemy has told us or kind of made us to believe, if that makes sense. And so if our heart wants to be in true union with the Lord, if our heart wants to be in step with him and living out his will for our lives, then we must be living in our true identity, in the truth that he has for us. And that makes all the difference in how we show up, what we believe, which fuels our mission here on earth.
Right. I just want to say from my own experience, I really think that facing our brokenness was my first step in really getting to my true identity, which is not easy, right? And not that I am anywhere near where I should be, but I'm saying the steps that I have taken thus far of facing, kind of where my temptation and my sin lies, right? Because I think a lot of our identity, false identities, right, can be founded in kind of inner wounds or emotional trauma, if you will, where we've had a emotional wound, we were wounded, we developed this belief that, okay, well, we're going to do it on our own, or I'm not lovable, or whatever you name it. These false identities, start to take seed, and the enemy sort of takes them and runs with them. And these false identities, and I'll just get vulnerable for a second. The big one for me was unworthiness. Like I was seeping in it, which unworthiness is actually a form of pride, because, if you have the spectrum of humility, pride is on one side, and unworthiness is on the other side. And so I really needed to dig deep into that pride to get to my true identity. It's not fun, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
It's not fun.
It might be one of the hardest things you ever do is to face all of your fears almost, And a lot of this process does start with confession, because confession is being truthful with God. And that is really the beginning of transformation. Like, unless we're honest with him about our fears and our thoughts and all these things, right? It's like he can't truly be honest with us, because we can't receive it until we give truth. A lot of times we can't receive truth.
Right. It says that I remember that in that Living Fearless book, that he will not talk to you if you're living in your false identity. Or I should say, he's talking to you, but you can't hear him.
Yeah.
When you're walking in your false identity. And that's because, of course, you're living under the counsel, of the enemy, and you're so with that said, I think, the enemy's really ultimate goal is to get us to believe those false identities and to live from those false identities. And one of the premise, and I read a book called Be Healed. I forget the author, but we'll put it in the show notes. Amazing book for really getting to the root of just spiritual identity and trauma and inner healing, basically, and deliverance. And he talked about something called vainglory, which is basically, a weakness of our fallen nature that grows stronger when we refuse to face our brokenness. And because we're prideful, so we don't want to look at the brokenness in us,
Yeah.
right? And he said basically that vainglory brings death to our hearts and blinds our eyes to the truth. And so we basically use these false identities to cover up our brokenness,
Right.
because we don't want the world to see our brokenness. Of course, I mean, who does? That's not fun. People, ironically, it's being that, having that vulnerability and being in our brokenness and being in community, and naming the sin, calling it out, name it and claim it, is that we connect with each other, right? And it's choking me up that we connect with each other and we understand that we're all struggling with the same things. If we would just share with each other.
Right. Yeah. We're all broken. Right. I mean, like, we're human. Every one of us is broken. And I think it's not until we really see that we can know we need a healer. And and it's not that until we're honest about the brokenness that he's got us where almost we needed to be the whole time. Because you're right. If like we have this vainglory and which is really pride, then we don't think we need God. Even though we might think it in our mind, we don't know it in our heart. And that's what he's always trying to kind of mend. And like, he wants us to live from our heart. But the enemy wants us to live in our mind, because our mind, he can work on that plane, and he can continue to make us believe these lies, and basically,
Twist our
find
thoughts.
ways to help us believe why things won't work and why they won't ever change, and why, it's just a whole cycle, honestly, that the enemy tries to keep us in. But I do love this verse, and since we're talking about truth, it's John 8:32, and it says, "Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." And I think there's so many levels of knowing the truth. We wanted to interrupt this episode to take a few quick seconds to share a testimonial from Morgan, who is a client we've been working with for a few months. This is what she says. "I'm so thankful for Cornerstone Integrative Healing, and specifically Hannah, who I have been having the pleasure of working with on my health journey. Hannah has been a wealth of knowledge and encouragement to me, and has gone above and beyond in answering all of my questions. I have worked with other functional medicine providers in the past, but in the end, they really only suggest a couple of supplements and didn't really help me. They provided no other action steps. Hannah has provided me with simple but important and foundational lifestyle and diet changes, and has recommended supplements based on my changing symptoms and needs. I feel like God led me to Cornerstone Integrative Healing, and with their help, I am finally on the right path to healing. I have been on this journey for years with no real answers. I have been recommending Cornerstone to everyone that is looking for an integrative approach to their healthcare. I highly recommend Hannah and the entire team." Thank you so much for those kind words, Morgan. And if this speaks to you and you would like to see if we're a good fit to walk with you on your specific health journey, you can find more information about how we can have a quick call to discuss. And then you can also find a link to our services in the show notes as well. Now, back to the episode. It's like we read that verse and we're like, yeah, we know the truth. Like, we were broken. God sent Jesus to save us. He died on the cross. He rose again. Like, yes, like that is amazing truth. But I think we stop with knowing it with our mind, and he's wanting us to know it with our heart and then our soul, right? I mean, like, that's completely different. And I don't really think that I realized that before maybe this past year, and like all that has happened. And then this book really helped me to see it too. There's so many levels to that. And oftentimes, it's like we almost think we just need to do the minimum requirements to sort of get into heaven, right? Like we check a box. I'm in, like I said, the prayer, I believe, even I go to church, like there's just so much more. And so this book and this concept has really helped me dig into that. And so I'm really thankful for it. And I can see how, and I've shared my story before about my digestive health and how it was really that I was holding on to things and I wasn't surrendering. And that is just one instance of how these things really do affect our physical health, because whenever we are continuing to believe these lies and live from that, we stay honestly in fear and in shame and in guilt. And that, just speaking from like how the spiritual affects the physical, that keeps us in a non-safety, like like our body recognizes it as that we're not safe. And so therefore our nervous system is turned on and everything kind of comes from that, if that makes sense in like a big picture way. We've talked about nervous system in the past. We'll link some episodes below if that's sort of a new concept for you. But that's exactly how spiritual things impact our physical health 100% of the time. Even if you don't even realize what's going on, like your body is wired for survival and it wants to feel safe. And so living in our false identity tells us that we're not safe because it's a lie.
Right. And false identities will keep us in shame. It will keep us in fear. It will keep us in striving. It will keep us in control. It will keep us those emotions, right? But we need to, as Kari said, get to the root of those emotions. Now, we've talked about this before in Chinese medicine, right? Like emotion, they think really all disease starts on the emotional level, right? To me, that makes perfect sense. Because as we believe these lies, we have these emotions that impacts our physical health. So, identity that's tied to these false identities that are, tied to these wounds maybe that we've had or trauma, need to be dug up. The roots need to be dug up. It needs to be exposed, so that God can heal it. And that's where you're going to get the emotional healing and the physical healing too.
Yeah. And just, we've talked about, we're talking about false identities, and you mentioned the fear, the guilt, and the shame, like that. Those are kind of the core three that most things are tied to in a false identity. And so just for instance, if your identity is tied to fear, then you'll typically want to control things. You might have anxiety. That might kind of be your way of coping with that. If your identity is tied to guilt, then you might have feelings of unworthiness, and then you're going to act like an unworthy person, trying to prove your worth constantly through things you do or, how you show up in the world. Like that's sort of the gist of, okay, this is the core of it, but this is how it manifests in our lives. And that's exhausting. Like just feeling like you need to prove yourself all the time, and that, you don't know where your worth comes from, or you want to control everything because you have this fear of just, of what may happen, what may or may not happen. So many people, and there's a lot of different things that are tied to fear, obviously, but, that this is where it starts. And, this isn't a quick process. A lot of times we don't want to say, do these things or even read this book and, you're going to have everything figured out. Certainly not. We're human. We're going to mess up. It's a daily thing that we have to really commit to. And we'll kind of talk maybe more about that in the next episode. But this is kind of your life's work almost, right? Is to,
yeah.
I mean, honestly,
it doesn't really end. It's never really over until the day you take your last breath. It's not,
right.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah. But I think it's a lot of times it does start with the awareness that these things are there. And it's just really a self-examination and really just a surrender of being honest. Because I think a lot of times, like, we struggle with things, but are we really being honest with God? Like, I'm frustrated. I'm angry. I don't, I think that's so important that we're honest with him and with ourselves. I think that, it's like sometimes we just almost just try to muscle through every day and we try to distract ourselves because we don't really want to realize how broken we are or how much we're struggling or, fill in the blank. And so that's why people have so many addictions, right? They're trying to run from the truth.
Or numb.
or numb. Right. And so, I know that if you're here listening to this podcast, you want healing, and you probably don't realize you probably realize that it's not going to come in the way that the world tells you that you're going to be healed. And so this is the hard work. This is, I think sometimes, and I've realized this over the years, like I used to think a long time ago, whenever I started my health journey, that it was going to be hard to avoid foods. It was going to be hard to remember to do all these things. But what I really realize now is this is the hard work. This is way harder than changing your diet or exercising or, fill in the blank of all the things that we think change our health, which I'm not saying that those things don't matter, but they don't really lead to the true healing. This does. So
the root. This is the
right.
root of the true healing.
Yes.
This is where the rubber hits the road. This is, if you don't do this, you will, in my opinion, you will always struggle with your health.
Yeah. And not that you won't anyway, right? I mean, like we're human, right, exactly. We're broken. Right. Yeah. So I know that that's not what you meant, but I think it's just, this is the work. This is the work that connects us too. Like you said, we're supposed to live in community, but we're so disconnected because we are all just kind of trying to run from the truth in essence. And we're numbing and we're distracted and we're all these things, but like, this is where so much fulfillment comes in pursuing this and then helping others pursue it. And then you're walking together, and like, that's how it all should work, right? That's discipleship. That's doing ministry together. That's pursuing his way over our way. And like, it's so much more fulfilling to do it with other people. And I'm so thankful that Jenn and I get to do it together. And we want to encourage you that if you don't feel like you have somebody that, can really walk with you, I know that the Lord provides everything that we need. And so let us be the first to say, like, if you feel alone or like you really, you're really missing that, just, be honest with God and ask him to just reveal who that is to you and just pray about it, because I think that's so important in our healing journeys, is to do this together. And he talks about that in this book, about how confession should be done in community. And confession isn't about us being sorry for what we've done wrong. It's really about opening up our brokenness to the Lord and being honest with him, and being able to then receive healing because we've been honest.
There's a grace in that.
Yeah.
An unbelievable grace.
Yeah. So we're thankful to have these conversations. It might sound strange to, a health and wellness podcast to be talking about these things, but I think this should be the norm versus not. And we pray that that's the new way, that we do see things as all connected, and that we do see this as the root, and that we are doing the hard work of, being honest and being vulnerable and confessing and repenting and all the things, and so we want to pray for you before we get off, but we want you to know that we're here. Also, if you have questions about this, or if you have thoughts, or if you want us to walk with you on your health journey. Jenn, do you want to pray?
Sure. Lord, we just come before you today. You said that when two or more are gathered, you are with us. Thank you for your promise. And we just ask you to bless every single person that is listening today, that you would give them the grace to face their brokenness, Lord. That you would walk with them in their journey toward healing, that you would put the people on their path that they need to help them face their brokenness, to disciple them, that you would, of course, use these people to then spread your message, Lord, and disciple others. And we would just ask that anybody that would need companionship, would need community, would somehow need prayers, Lord, just we're open. Use us, Lord, and use us however you see fit, Lord. Help us to decrease and as you increase, Lord, so that we might serve you for your glory. We ask this all in your name. Amen. If this episode has served you in any way, drop a review wherever you listen to podcasts. We'd love it if you'd share any aha moments or takeaways on Instagram and tag us at Cornerstone Integrative Healing.
And if you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do so. We want to continue to walk this journey with you. Until next time, friends, know that we are praying for you.